On this digital media clip, we're going to look at engaging conversations and why sometimes we don't have a chat when we know we should. So let's start with the primary reasons why people walk by rather than walk over and have a conversation. Whether we like it or not, human beings are mood dependent. Whether it's our own mood or the mood the other person's normally in, nobody likes to speak to somebody who's always got a sad on. It's like they suck out all of your positive energy and you walk away thinking, I'm really glad I took the time to speak to them today. The next thing, I guess, is whether they're Mr. Positive or Mr. Negative. You know, the kind of guy who always finds a reason why nothing's going to work and the world's never going to change, versus the kind of person you meet who says they can always find a better way or do something that improves the way they operate. So a positive and negative person will often engage and engender different types of conversations. The next person we might want to think about is Mr. Passive, Aggressive, Assertive or Receptive. Everybody wants to talk to Mr. Receptive, but sometimes maybe we avoid the others. Then we've got I don't know them. Dare I build rapport? Have I got what it takes to speak to somebody? I don't know. Another one is I don't know the job. You'll find coaches avoid having conversations with people doing work. They have no idea what they're doing. And they often feel that their lack of competency in that area gets in the way of a conversation. Whereas my experience is saying, I don't understand how this works. Can you help me? People just want to tell you everything they know. Sometimes status gets in the way. The status of the person, are they a manager, leader, supervisor that's doing something daft? They might take this the wrong way if I speak to them. So maybe I'll just look the other way and pretend I haven't noticed. Odds against. You're walking through site and you see 4 scaffolders, and maybe 1 or 2 of them are doing something daft, but there's 4 of them and there's 1 of you. Will you look the other way and pretend you haven't seen them rather than have a difficult conversation because their odds are against you? Another reason we might not have a conversation is congruence. And in this case, we're talking about congruence, meaning you've done the same daft stuff too. And it feels a little trite to go over and have a conversation with somebody to ask them not to do what they probably know and you definitely know you've done before. Is sometimes we just struggle with how to start. How on earth do I start a conversation when I've never even spoke to them before? We talked about that on logical levels and about the fact that we always start a conversation by working from the bottom up. Start with the soft stuff like, what's it like here? What have you been doing today? How does this work? So if we start a conversation with the soft stuff, we can work up to the more challenging conversations about how safe they're working or whether they could do something differently to improve. So let's now start to consider some of the more interesting types of individuals we're likely to meet in the workplace. Assertive people tend to be win-win conversations. Assertive people like to be heard, but they're okay listening to what you have to say too. And your conversations are very much based around both having a point of view. They have energy and drive and they want to make the world a better place. Receptive people still have high levels of energy and a positive attitude. They just aren't quite as pushy with their opinions as assertive people, and they tend to receive very readily incoming suggestions and questions, and they tend to work with you really well. Passive people tend to have lose-win conversations. They will say yes just to get you out of their face. Passive people tend to have low self-esteem, and whilst they might say yes, unconsciously they're saying no to almost everything you say because they feel they're not worthy. So passive people take a lot more work. Aggressive people tend to go for win-lose conversations. They win and you lose. They very much want to demonstrate that they're in charge and they're right and it's everybody else who's got it wrong. A lot of people stay away from aggressive people because they tend to frighten them. But the reality is, at least they're passionate about something, and if you can get them on board, there's normally a lot to learn. So as a performance coach, manager, leader, supervisor, As you think about the crossed opinions model, where are you? How do other people see you? Are you assertive or receptive? Are you passive or aggressive? How do you get the best out of a conversation with another type of person? We should probably be somewhere in the middle. We should have the ability to be flexible in our approach, because the person with the most flexibility always finds a way through. So on our rapport digital media clip, we've talked about the importance of matching, pacing and leading, and the fact that we're matching their current body language, tonality and words, and then we pace them for a little while to get a better conversation, and then eventually we start to lead them to a more positive, more high energy, more focused place. So those rules are still true when we come to deal with what most people perceive to be the most challenging person on our model, which is Mr. Aggressive. Now, Mr. Aggressive is often high energy, high self-esteem, but a very negative attitude. They tend to talk people down, and they tend to be very difficult to match with. That's because if we match on all three communication styles, body language, tonality, and words, they will be forced to up the ante. So the secret of getting rapport with Mr. Aggressive is to match 2 out of 3. We might match body language and words, but not tonality, or we might match words and tonality, but not body language. And this says to the other person, I really understand your anger. In fact, probably the worst thing we can say to Mr. Aggressive is calm down, because calm down says to him at a subconscious level, we don't recognize why he's angry. There's a great story about a technician who goes into a customer's house, and the customer is really cross because the energy supplier has really tied them up in knots and let them down. And the technician says, I totally agree with you. If I was in your situation, I'd be angry too. This throws the customer completely off balance, and that allows them then to say, cool, you understand that I'm cross, now how do we get this job done? So Mr. or Mrs. Aggressive, you can build rapport with them, but you just have to do it in a slightly more subtle way by mismatching one of the key communication tools. The final thing we need to be aware of with Mr. or Mrs. Aggressive, if we can't build rapport with them, we have to be prepared to retreat. And retreating, whilst the safe thing to do, does eventually damage our self-esteem if we allow it. Sometimes we have to go passive and let them win, because it's better to let them win the argument than get a bent nose or beat up.